Good morning from Riverton. Yes, good morning from a somewhat nippy, but we've seen much worse days here. And let's see what we've got on tap here today. First of all, what we've all been wondering about, of course, is the renewal update. There we go. Um, Actually, we did Georgia and Alabama did really good on that deadline day. We got they got about 84% or so in there. So there's still some stragglers there that still need to be filed. And we've also included the reminders for 9 LPFM stations in Florida that have still not filed. They have until February 3rd, 2020 to file. They also have till about the end of this month to file in order to avoid up to a $3,000 forfeiture. So those are some of the things that So Georgia and Alabama, if you're watching out there, you haven't filed yet, please make sure you file your renewal. Let's see, where are we going next? I think we're going to Mississippi, Louisiana, and I believe Arkansas are the next states that are up and running now. And we'll be talking a little bit more about a neat little tool that we now have for renewals that's out there. And we'll talk about that near the end of today's live stream. I am monitoring comments or chat on YouTube, so if you go to YouTube, and if you're on YouTube, and please, go into the chat window. I am watching it. Yes, I am watching it. So if you want to try to derail me while I do what I do, that's the place to do it. Okay. Let's talk about the December open meeting. There we go. This is wow. There is a lot of stuff on tap for this upcoming open meeting for the FCC. The Sunshine Agenda should be coming out today, which will update the agenda items that are there. But as of right now, these are the agenda items that will be on tap for the upcoming meeting here. 988 Suicide Prevention Hotline. You've probably seen some publicity around this one in the mainstream news. And Ajit Pai is working on an initiative to make 988 a short dialing code for suicide prevention hotlines, basically because all the N11 numbers have run out. And so they've got to switch to other 3-digit codes. The problem with 988 is, and I'm speaking now as a former phone freak and somebody who's been involved in that kind of stuff for many years, is while that's all fine and dandy for our modern day cell phones where you have to dial a number then hit a send button, for the more of the legacy central offices, and for those of us who use like terminal adapters so we can use analog phones, this creates kind of a little bit of an issue because in switch translations, it's like, okay, so you got 988, okay, but what about if you have subscribers in your area code that have 988 phone numbers, 988-1234, for example? How do you prevent, how do you prevent misdials? Somebody dials slowly. They dial 988, and then they are trying, and then they wait, and then before they can even dial 1234, the line starts ringing. This is becoming less and less of an issue now with the fact that we are in a wireless generation now, and we weren't there back in my days, and it gets you wondering, is the FCC, I haven't read the NPRM yet. I don't think the NPRM addresses this, But the big question I have is is the FCC going to force these phone companies that have subscribers with 988 prefixes in the many different area codes that have that prefix, if they're going to be forced to change their phone numbers? And if so, what are we going to do in some of these areas where there aren't, we've got, we got probably some area codes out there that are still, in exhaustion. And, I highly doubt that the 988 area code, the 988 prefix is going to cause an area code split anywhere. But I don't know what's going to happen there. I think what's going to happen is that for the analog the digital switches out there for analog telephones that are still out there, the 5ESS, DMS 100 type switches and stuff like that. I think what they're going to have to do is they are going to have to, they're going to have to put in a delay. So when you dial the 988 and then you wait, or maybe if you dial 988 pound, then it will time out and go through to and route to the suicide prevention hotline. When I lived in Southern California, and we ran REC 407 and the old REC phone lines from the back in those days, we had a very interesting quirk in the Northridge, California 1A ESS office that was there. That was the central office that housed 407 and 700, 882, 885, 886, 998, 341. Yeah, okay, yeah. All in the 818 area code, by the way. That switch, if you were to dial a conflict code, and that means like a 3-digit prefix, local 7-digit phone number, first 3-digit prefix was one where the second digit was a 0 or a 1, which we call them conflict codes because at the time they conflicted with area codes. And this was back before area codes could have a digit other than 0 and 1 as the second digit. And there was always this noticeable hesitation if you dialed a conflict code out of the Northridge Central office. And in order for you to get the call through faster, you'd have to dial pound afterwards. So you'd have to dial 407 1000 pound. And that was just in the Northridge Central office. And from what we found out eventually was that the central office had one major Centrex customer in it who wanted the ability to be able to dial 10-digit numbers without a 1. And that's and for some reason that messed up the switch translations for every POTS customer in that central office. So really weird stuff there. Really weird stuff. Promoting innovation in the 5.9 gigahertz band. We've been hearing a little bit about these types of things, and also, I guess, the expansion of Wi-Fi in the 5 megahertz band. I've been getting a lot of propaganda tweets from Cisco about this, and I think that's what this has to do with here. The Commission will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking that will take a fresh and comprehensive look at the rules for the 5.9 gigahertz band and propose, among other things, to make the lower 45 megahertz of the band available for unlicensed operation and to permit cellular to everything, CV, cellular vehicle to everything, operations in the upper 20 megahertz of the band. So yeah, that's probably why they're pushing the 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, is because I guess they're trying to expand the band, and so there we go. Facilitating shared use in the 3.1 to 3.55 gigahertz band. The Commission will consider the notice of proposed rulemaking that would seek comment on removing the existing non-federal allocations in the 3.3 to 3.55 band as a step towards potential future shared use between federal incumbents and commercial users. I believe this is the C-band thing. Again, I haven't read the actual NPRM. I really don't get too involved in these days. I don't really get too involved in like International Bureau and stuff like that, and the mobile broadband side of it. There's just way too much there. And right now we are in such a mode right now with what's going on in the Media Bureau. The Media Bureau right now is keeping me very busy in the Media Bureau. And so we don't get really too much into that right now. Voice over IP symmetry. The Commission will consider an order on remand and declaratory ruling that would promote continued investment in IP-based networks by clarifying that a local exchange carrier partnering with a VoIP provider may assess end-office switched access charges only if the carrier and its VoIP partner provides a physical connection to the last mile facilities used to serve an end user. I'm wondering if this has to do with the per minute charges there, the carriage charges and such, the interconnection charges. And this is something that, freeconferencecall.com, for example, has made a business out of this, where they work with a carrier that has a relationship with, these smaller telephone companies and such. And the way it works is that these rural telephone companies are allowed to charge a higher interconnection rate in order to recover their costs that are associated with placing a phone call into the network. And the problem is, the issue that and of course it's big telco it's big telecom that's screaming about this, is that what these small companies then do is they then take some of that interconnection revenue and pass it back to the provider, whoever is providing them with all that traffic. For example, freeconferencecall.com. This is how freeconferencecall.com is able to do what they do. They place call. They get traffic. They attract traffic by offering a free business conferencing service. The calls come in. They get routed through a rural telephone company. That rural telephone company then puts the is the one that actually is actually connecting the calls, and then they're able to get the revenue from the other companies for the interconnection of that call. And then, because they're a rural company, they're allowed to charge higher interconnection rates than say, like Verizon in New York City or something like that. And then they turn around and they take the profits off of that. They take, they shave some off the top and give it back to freeconferencecall.com. And that's how it works. We used to have, there used to be party line type, social chat lines like that back in the 90s that did the same thing. They had local numbers in these small rural communities, and they were able to offer a free service because they were making money off the interconnections. So, I mean, it's not a scam. I wouldn't necessarily, I mean, it's kind of, I have to defend the industry in some ways. So anyway, what else is on the agenda here? Now we're getting into Media Bureau stuff. First of all, cable service change notifications. The Commission will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking that would seek comment on modernizing requirements that for notices cable operators must provide consumers and local franchise authorities. And this would be like, for example, these are the, you know how sometimes you get like those rate cards in the mail? If you're a traditional cable subscriber, every so, like once a year or so, you get those thick little booklets that have all your have all the rate card information. It has the channel lineup information might be in there and such. And what the FCC is wanting to do, and this is being requested by Big Cable, is to allow this stuff to go online and go away from paper notifications. And REC does not have a position on this really. Personal position is we still have a lot of folks from an older generation that still read TV Guide magazine that don't understand the technical aspects of various things. And do we continue to provide paper notices, or do we allow customers to opt in or opt out? Perhaps that might be an option. I don't know. But anyway, the next one is the big one. It's what's getting me to go to DC next week. And that, of course, is the MB Docket 19.3, which is for non-commercial and low-power FM station licensing. And we'll talk about that here in just a second, because there's a whole treasure trove of stuff that's on there, and I do want to cover it again. Again, if you have any questions, the live chat is open. Feel free to use it. Feel free to use it. It's there. It's for you. It's for you to use, abuse, and hopefully not ignore. So feel free to pop any questions in the chat there. There's also, they say, 3 Enforcement Bureau actions on the agenda. I think they've already taken care of one of them, and we're going to talk about it later in this broadcast. So there you go. It's going to be a very busy meeting now. That meeting will not be carried on the REC Live next week. I will be in DC for that meeting. I will be in attendance with that meeting. And meetings are, the meetings are open to the public. If you get there, you can attend any open meeting once a month. And you just need a good federal ID that's Real ID Act approved, and you have to go through security screening. Kind of like going to the airport. You put your bag in the X-ray thing, and you walk through a metal detector. At least they don't have body scanners yet. Hopefully they don't come out. I hate those body scanners at the airports. So always arrive early, so that way you can clear through security. If you decide to go to the meeting, it will be tomorrow at 10:30. This item is later down the agenda, so it may be a bit longer. We have also that day I will be meeting with staff. I will be meeting with staff in regards to MB Docket 19193 LP 250. And the LP 250, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get LP 250 back on the agenda. We're trying to get that back on as a further notice of proposed rulemaking. So that way we have a full set of comment and reply comment periods specifically for LP 250. Translator relief, which is just basically being able LPFM stations being able to use contours instead of distance separation towards FM translators, as well as short spacing of LPFM stations, allowing more than one LPFM station to, allowing two LPFM stations to be within 24 kilometers of each other, and using contours to show protections. Some limited use of directional antennas in all these things. And the translator interference remediation policy for LP250, translator relief, and LPFM to LPFM short spacing. And that the fact that the upgrade to LP250 would only be allowed for upgrades. So meaning you have to be licensed up and running as an LP100 first, and then you can try to upgrade to 250 if you can. That way, in the event that there is interference, you can still safety blanket your way back to LP100. You have not lost out on your investment. That's why I'm insisting on LP250 only as an upgrade and not out of the box during the initial LPFM window. Of course, we're also going there to discuss windows. We're going there to discuss public notices and whatever else we can squeeze in less than a half hour per person. They don't give me a lot of time. I can take all the time I want here, but they don't give me a lot of time there. Okay, well, let's continue on to the items that will be on MB Docket 19193. Wow! Look at all of these. Oh my gosh. There's a whole laundry list of items, and these are all, these are all going to be in the report in order. At least they were in the draft. There might be, I don't know if there's going to be any changes or not by the time this reaches editorial privilege. But these are the basic issues. Organization bylaws no longer required to specify localism or diversity in ownership. This is for NCE stations for full service. Now, when I say NCE, that means full service, Class A through C, non-commercial educational stations. And, up until now, if you want to claim the diversity and ownership point, or if you wanted to claim the localism point, you had to include in your organization's bylaws or governance documents that the organization is committed to staying local in the community and committed to only owning one broadcast station. Those specific requirements will go away. What it will be replaced with is there'll be a holding period where once you get the station, you can't really move it. You got it, for 4 years. And you're held to diversity and ownership for 4 years. So that's pretty much what they've got there. And second one, that's a typo. Second one should be recognize divestiture pledges for points. This is where, let's say you're currently an LPFM licensee and you're in an area where you can get full service. You file for a full service new construction permit in the window. You disclose that you have an LPFM station. In the past, the ownership of the, in the past, the way it works for non-commercial, LPFM to non-commercial, it's always worked this way, is that you can claim the point already for diversity. And because, you can't own both an LPFM and a full-service NCE station. So your full-service NCE construction permit is conditioned on the fact that you're going to divest of your LPFM station. You'll still be granted the construction permit. You'll have 3 years to build it, but in that 3 years, you also have to figure out how you're going to get rid of your LPFM station. And before you can go to program test or any kind of on-air operation on the full service, the LPFM has to be divested. And so in the case of NCE stations, where this will come into play is that if the NCE organization, let's say they're in town A already, they want to move their organization completely to town B, so they file for a new station in town B, and they're committed to being local within town B and being, and being diverse and having town B be their only location. As long as they commit to divesting themselves of their station in town A, they can claim the diversity. They can claim the point for ownership diversity for the station in town B, as long as they get rid of the town A prior to program test. Expand the tiebreaker policy. This is an interesting one that was brought up by Michael Cousins and Alan Korn. What this is going to do is for full service NCE is if the there's two tiebreakers right now, and the tiebreakers are based on the number of authorizations, the number of stations that somebody already has, an organization already has. The second one is the number of applications they have that they had filed in the filing window. And of course, for many of the small, new upstart organizations, these will always be 1 and 1. And so there were a lot of ties in this last 2007 window, and this is what the FCC is going to be addressing. So what they're going to do is they're going to add one additional tiebreaker before it goes to time sharing, and that is going to be that it's going to be based on whether the organization that is filing had filed in either the 2007 or 2010 NCE windows, and they were rejected because of points. If they were beaten out on points, then they would go, and they were dismissed, then they would have some priority in this window if it reached the third tiebreaker. So that's what that's about. Align the NCE timeshare policy so it's closer to that of LPFM. What they're looking at is extending the time that you can negotiate a timeshare agreement to 90 days, and going to more of the LPFM style of, and actually codifying what a default timeshare would look like, if there were 2 or 3-way timeshare, and it'd be just like the way it is for, for LPFM, 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. I believe it is for 2 parties, and then there's a 3-party where each one gets 8. It also means non-renewable licenses for NCE stations that do not negotiate any kind of a timeshare agreement. This includes if a group goes to a mandatory timeshare, and this is the way it currently is in LPFM, is if a group goes to a mandatory timeshare and they don't negotiate an agreement during the settlement period, and the licenses are considered non-renewable, they could make them renewable licenses anytime just by reaching a timeshare agreement, even if that timeshare agreement is the same exact hours they're currently on. As long as what the FCC wants is they want the stations to be talking to each other. And so that's what we've got there. Again, feel free to post any specific questions regarding this in the chat, and I can answer those for you. Clarify and modify 4-year holding period. This is the holding period for the diversity and localism, and pretty much what this means is that if you won your construction permit on points, then you have to pretty much stay put. Stay in that basic local area for 4 years. Once 4 years is over with, then yeah, you can move on, do something different and such. But you've got to be able to serve what you claimed for at least 4 years under under this. And permit. Okay, let's go to some LPFM related issues. Prohibit nunc pro tunc, like quid pro quo. That's the words. That's what's going on right now, and we don't get into politics here on this channel. Prohibit nunc pro tunc to remove those with a pirate past. Basically, what this is, nunc pro tunc, first of all, is a term that you may hear by use, and you may hear within FCC stuff, especially around the filing windows. And basically, nunc pro tunc is kind of like that company ServPro with their slogan, like it never happened, is basically what it is. And it's allowing you to go back and make changes to correct something that was done before that was not correct, maybe. And what I call nunc pro tunc is, I call it changing the past, because I've got a huge issue with nunc pro tunc in some of these cases, because people are using it to remove board members and such. They're using it for gamesmanship purposes. And I even asked in this proceeding that the nunc pro tunc, that this limitation also extend to other reasons for changing board members, such as unauthorized transfers of control, shadow ownership, all the Caesar Guel stuff. That's in there. And so bottom line is this, is that currently is that up until this rule, let's say you have 3 board members on your original application, and it turns out that your organization gets an informal objection, or whatever reason, the commission finds out that one of your 3 board members was previously issued a notice of unauthorized operation for operating a pirate radio station in violation of Section 301 of the Communications Act. You've been able to, after the fact, after the dismissal, when they dismiss you, filing reconsideration, removing that party, and requesting nunc pro tunc, and requesting it be done nunc pro tunc, like it never happened. Nunc pro tunc is sometimes also used for some various technical issues. Let's say you file, we saw this happen, you file a construction permit, you include a second adjacent channel waiver. The problem is that the second adjacent channel waiver was written for a different channel, and you've got the wrong 2 stations up there that you're trying to protect. The FCC has allowed those to be changed on nunc pro tunc. However, if you short space and you do not include anything to address that you're short spacing, and and requesting a waiver, that's a fatal mistake. And your application will be dismissed, and there is no chance for to be able to fix that nunc pro tunc. So make sure that and this is only, we're talking about new station applications. We're talking about original construction permits in an upcoming filing window. And so there we go. Related question. The wife of an ex-pirate can ask for an LPFM license? Good question. Now, there are rules regarding spousal interest. There are rules regarding whether a spouse of an applicant, of a party to an application, how they're going to benefit. And this has never been addressed for pirate radio. This has only been addressed in the past for ownership limitations, mainly in the commercial sector. But this has never been addressed for a, in this case. Al Davis is saying yes, you can. I am leaning on that point. I'm leaning in that direction right now because it's not circumventing an ownership restriction. The thing is this, is that on the 318 application, and what's eventually going to be scheduled 318 once we go to, once LMS does original construction permits, the question basically states that does any party to this application, keyword any party to this application, certify that none of the parties to this application have ever been determined to be to have received a notice of unlicensed operation or any violation of Section 301 of the Communications Act. That's all it says. And it probably could be challenged through informal objection, but I don't think it would go anywhere. Because it really doesn't touch on the attribution. It's actually a one-time certification. It's not an ownership restriction. Now, an LCRA argument could be, I don't even think an LCRA argument could be made on this. Because again, it's not a ownership related rule, so I don't think it would fall under the FCC's policies on spousal attribution. This is definitely a good attorney question, but I'm siding with Al Davis on this one, and I'm going to say, yeah. I'm going to say yeah for now. I'm going to say yes on that. Let's see. Permit timeshare agreements during the window. Basically what this means is for LPFMs, meaning that a timeshare agreement, normally the FCC requires that when there's multiple, when there's mutually exclusive applications, that you have to wait until the 90-day period before you can discuss timeshare agreements with anyone else. What the FCC wants to do is they want to kind of streamline that and to make it so you can discuss them earlier. You can even discuss them during the filing window or even beforehand. It's pre-negotiated timeshare agreements. It will, I kind of have some issues with this, and but again, we're going to work with what we've got. This is what the FCC is giving us, so we're going to work with what we've got. I think the one kind of a backstop to this is the next item, which is limiting of timeshare agreements to 3 applicants. So under this rule, there will never be another timeshare group of more than 3. And this addresses an issue that I brought up after the previous window, and that is the issue of having using multiple groups, giving them each about like 10 hours a time, the minimum per week. And and especially in cases where they're sharing the same facilities or they end up sharing the same facilities, and using that as an attempt to stack points to try to get an advantage over other groups. That's where I had an issue with this. So bottom line is what we're going to see now is we're going to see no more than 15 points can be aggregated under this new rule. And so we're going to probably see a few more tiebreakers where community presence is going to be brought into play. Now, I know there are some other groups out there that don't like the concept of requiring community presence, and that being such a big factor. Another question received to me offline on this. What about going back to the just a quick cross ownership question? What about LPTV and LPFM cross ownership? I would say yes. I would say spousal attribution could apply in that case if they are using the spouse in order to circumvent the rules to be able to have multiple ownership. Again, it just depends on what involvement the other spouse has on the influence of the other facility that they're not allowed to own. We've had spousal attribution. I believe I've got one spousal attribution case going right now somewhere. New York, Long Island, WLIX. I've got the spousal attribution issue going on there right now in regards to and we think this is a father-son attribution, which is also it's not spousal attribution, it's familial interest, and so so that's what we're looking at. So it's basically husband wife. The FCC doesn't specifically say it, but I'm assuming that also means same-sex married spouse, brother, sister, child, parent are the relationships where this kind of attribution comes into play. Al Davis says it depends on how you define community presence. Well, the FCC is looking at mainly the dates that your organization was filed with the State Department of Corporations. That's mainly what they looked at in the previous window. You had to include your articles of incorporation with your application and any documentation that would back up the date that you entered on the form. Incorporating a do-over window if one of the timeshare applicants drops out. Let's say you've got a timeshare group of 3 and for somehow or another before the final decision was made by the FCC, one of those timeshares drops out. You drop from 15 down to 10 points. Maybe you're tying with somebody else or something. The FCC wants to do is just say, okay, we're just going to do this whole thing over. Let's go ahead and redo this whole entire timeshare negotiation. So, Al, back on community presence, that's the definition that I and some others disagree with. Again, it's we'd have to go back and look and see what the FCC originally intended in the rulemakings. To see where that would kick in, but it's local community presence, and I know there's a lot of groups out there. Like I said, there's a lot of groups that don't agree with that and saying why should the older group get the advantage? And I know this was discussed in 19.3. I don't know if anybody's going to bring this issue up for reconsideration or not, and I totally understand. I really don't. On this one I go with the flow with the status quo. But I definitely feel that if those who are who do oppose the community presence dates, we come up with a better solution, then we can bring it forward. It's going to be a little late to do it for 19.3 because we're about to go into sunshine on this today. So I did see the ex parte though that Mike Cousins and Alan Korn just put in regards to the issues with what was that he was talking about, the oh gosh, I just had a complete brain fart on that. Oh my God! I got to go back and read the letter there, and so unless you know what I'm talking about here, feel free to chime in. Let's see, what else have we got here? Board changes of over 50% will be considered as minor. So if during the application process the board changes by more than 50% before the grant, then it's not going to be automatically dismissed. Secondary grants, that's what it was. Okay, I remember now. Okay, what Mike Cousins and Alan Korn were talking about was in mutually exclusive situations where you had a group, where you had, let's say, okay, let me give you a real world case. We had 6 applicants in an MX in a MX group. There was a group of 3 from the Portland area. There was a group of 2 from the Portland area, and then there was a 4-pointer in Vancouver, Washington. The Vancouver station was MX with the 3-party group. And so what happened was that the 3-party group they filed, of course, for 15 points. The 2-party group filed for 10, so the 15 beat the 10. However, the 10-point group filed an informal objection against the 15-point group applicants on technicalities such as that a board member did not sign the application and some various other things. And that group got two of those applications were dismissed as a result of that objection, and so that dropped them down to 5 points. The other group came in and won 10 points. The problem was that strayed out the 4-point station in Vancouver, which was more than 24 kilometers from the 2 stations that did win. And because of the rules, because of the prohibition on secondary grants, that Vancouver station was dismissed, even though they were fully spaced from the other 2 stations. And they did go to recon on that one, and recon was denied. Reconsideration was denied, and it was because the FCC has a policy of not doing secondary grants. In this case, a secondary grant would have given that station to Vancouver. Michael Cousins and Alan Korn did also explain an excellent case where secondary grants would have come into play, and that was in Hawaii, where there was a MX group there that had many applicants that pretty much just went across all the islands, just went through the whole island chain. And it would have been possible to break that up and make that into several new stations, but no, because of the rules and because of how the FCC handles daisy chains, that's the way it is. So, all right, so there we go. That was the brain fart that finally unfarted. Site assurance. We are finally getting in is a certification question for site assurance. So bottom line is that if you would have on an application for original construction permit, you will have to certify that you have permission, that if in the event that you do get a construction permit granted, that site owner would be able to get you space. It's not a contract. You don't need a contractual agreement here. You just need a meeting of the minds and a general understanding that's the understanding. It's just a general understanding. The application will request that you include the name and phone number of the site owner. This is good. I wanted a certification letter from the site owner, but a name and phone number is that's an acceptable concession, I guess. So this is going to help. Where this is going to help the most is it's going to kind of, unless he finds a new way to game the system, it's going to kind of prevent another Caesar Guel from happening. And and that would have been and that was the case. If we had this too, that probably would have prevented some of the stuff that happened in MX Group 27. Because I can tell you there were definitely a few applicants in there that were definitely not on sites that they had reasonable assurance for. And, I mean, come on. Sepulveda Pass. Okay, I'll stop there. Let's see what we got here. Tolling. Tolling is when you have an expiration date extended beyond like the 3 years because of extenuating circumstances. Tolling for certain situations which are within the FCC's control or things that the FCC manages will be automatic. This would be like, for example, your you've got a license application, or you got a construction permit out there, or some kind of a permit out there that was granted, and then somebody had filed a petition for reconsideration against the grant. Okay, now you're in administrative review. If for some reason, you know, they file for a petition for reconsideration, the Media Bureau denies it. They go for an application for review of the Media Bureau's denial, and the full commission denies that. And then they go to the Circuit Court of Appeals. It goes into judicial review. And again, that's time that shouldn't be counted against your construction. Other issues, the other issue that I brought up was international coordination. This happens with stations along the Mexican border, where the FCC notifies Mexico of this facility. Mexico never answers back. The FCC gives them time to answer back. If they don't answer back, the FCC grants the permit anyway with a condition saying, this has not yet been cleared through Mexico, and if you do decide to build, then you will be able to you two will be able to move forward with you'll be able to move forward with the construction. However, you're doing it at your own risk. But if you want to extend it out, then you have to contact the commission to have it tolled. That's the way it is today. The way it will be later is that it's going to be tolled anyway for you. You still have to request tolling in event of a natural disaster, or in the event of some other kind of a judicial review that doesn't involve the commission, such as you build on a site and some organization takes you to court, in that case, the FCC would not have any info on that. You do have to still provide that information to get that tolled. Construction permits, this affects everybody. Construction permits will be extended from 18 to 36 months. So that means if you file a construction permit for a modification of your existing LPFM, or for the next window, an original construction permit, it will be granted for 36 months. For original permits, you won't have to ask for an extension anymore. For modifications, you were never able to ask for an extension. You just had to file again if you were not able to make the 18 months. And it's going to be, this is across the board, it's going to be just like the other broadcast services there. On assignments and transfers, the FCC is eliminating the 3-year waiting period on assignments. This was originally put in place in answer to the 2003 Great Translator Invasion window, worried that construction permits would be trafficked. There's still that risk. Construction permits were trafficked in 2013. It did happen. It just didn't happen through the assignment process. So it's really not stopping much, but it is preventing an organization that after they build and they realize they really can't run this thing, to be able to give it to another qualified organization that can run it. And we saw a couple good LPFMs go away because of that. This just reopens the door and allows that to happen. And this was one that I brought into play. This was part of my media modernization comments. Also, with that too is that the other part of that though is to prevent gamesmanship. Is that if within the first 4 years of the grant of the license that that license gets assigned to another organization, and if and only if that original construction permit was granted due to a comparison of points, meaning somebody else lost their construction permit application because of points, because you beat them out on points. That would be the new organization coming in would have to have the same number of points and would have to have a older community presence date in order to be able to assign that. So basically what this prevents also happening is a strong organization comes in to apply for a station on behalf of a weaker organization that may not be able to claim the full 5 points. We saw this happen in the 2013 window. After 3 years, suddenly, bam, we saw this big influx of assignments happen for organizations that didn't have the 5 points. So I mean, it's not gonna totally stop all the gamesmanship, but it's going to help. Al Davis also supports the concept of actually having a letter and for site assurance. I totally agree. I feel like that the letter would have prevented a lot of the Caesar Guel stuff, because what we are finding is that in a lot of these Caesar Guel situations, they were mainly at American Tower sites, and the ones that the FCC did investigate before Pete Doyle decided we don't have enough resources to do all these. The ones that Alex Sangenis did investigate, it turned out that a lot of those, that those didn't have site assurance, and they were dismissed for that reason. The last one for Canoga Park, the last one that just got recently dismissed, again, that was a site that one was a site assurance question that showed up on a letter of inquiry that was never answered. And because they never answered the second letter, this was the second letter of inquiry on Canoga Park. And because they didn't answer that question, they didn't answer the letter of inquiry, they were dismissed. They never had assurance at the site. It was an American Tower site up in the hills, west of Hidden Hills, that area up there. So, Al Davis says, yeah, we saw shadow-owned LPFMs as placeholders for future translators. Bingo! Yes, we did. Caesar Guel and Dan Alpert. We saw a bunch of those construction permits get canceled and get translators in behind them. Because we saw that they were, we couldn't necessarily prove it, nor was there really any, nor did we have a lot of grounds to. But yeah, I am aware that some of the translators, that some of the frequencies were sold for translators, for translators to be placed on them, and yeah. So yeah, there was gamesmanship in that last window, and at least with the name and phone number on there, it gives us an opportunity to investigate if they claim that they have site assurance there. Gives us a chance to investigate. Permit assignments of original construction permits after 18 months. This is kind of, I hate to call it this, but it's kind of the failing station initiative. And the idea is simple here, is that we have organizations that are granted construction permits during the window. And, out of all the excitement over, hey, you get your own radio station for your organization, the problem was that turns out that once they realized the sticker shock, And once they realize how much it costs to really build a station, their organization says, no, we're not going to do it. And under the current rules, they have to give up the construction permit, give somebody else. Again, this is put in to prevent trafficking. And so what we're saying is look, we saw the experiences that happened in the first window. We saw the attempts by some applicants, by some grantees to assign their construction permits to other legit organizations. Why not do this? Why not do an 18-month holding period? So this gives the original organization 18 months to build. And if for some reason after 18 months they decide they can't do it, they can give they can assign it to another organization. And that organization, of course, has to be vetted and approved by the FCC to be a commission licensee. And then they get whatever's left of that 36-month construction permit to finish the job. So that's pretty much what we're looking at there. Flint, Michigan, as an example of a shadow-owned LPFM application. I'm not specifically familiar with that one, but we'll run with that. That's not a problem there. So those are the items under consideration there, and those are the items that will be in the report in order. Again, the meeting is next Thursday, unless the FCC decides to reach decision on it sooner. I'm already committed, so I'm unless if they do decide to do it sooner, I may still go. But like they did with 19193, they decided to do it early before the meeting because they knew the meeting was going to be busy because it had that issue with it had a couple other issues in there. George Bowen says, "Hi, Michi. I want to talk to you about doing an FCC segment for This Week in Amateur Radio." Absolutely. Yeah. I guess is this my audition? Did I get the part? Yeah. Yeah, we can definitely talk about that, and definitely talk about doing it. I qualify. I'm KU3N. So yeah, I do qualify for that, and such. Offline comment talking about the Canoga Park situation, and one of the address came up as undeliverable. Yeah, and there was a lot. If you go back in the record on that one, the Canoga Park Hispanic community, you can search for it in FCC data. And look at the original letter of inquiry and look at my response to that letter of inquiry. You'll see some of the other issues that we came up with that one. Problem is this. If you're going to screw around, don't screw around in my old neighborhood. Don't screw around in an area like that I know like the back of my hand. That doesn't work. Canoga Park, Van Nuys, the San Fernando Valley, don't mess with it because that's my old stomping grounds, and that is deep in the REC area of interest to this day. And we got to move on. We're running late. We're over an hour now. We're going to keep going. AMFM Act. The Ask Musicians, what is it? It's the Ask Musicians for Music Act or whatever. And bottom line, I finally had a chance to read the bill text as it was put together, and I did issue a statement yesterday through the REC channels yesterday in regards to this. But here's some of the highlights is what they're doing is they're taking existing they're taking some existing law that was put into place for digital transmission of music over the air. And the original mindset behind this goes back to the early days of IBOC or even before digital radio, when they were anticipating that music could be delivered digital and that there would be subscription services. Because, HD radio does have the capability on FM of doing subscription services. And so what they're proposing to do with this bill is they're basically talking about removing the word digital in a few places, and basically applying this rule to all radio, analog and digital. But a couple of additional things they want to add in there to kind of sweeten the pot. Now, of course, you know the NAB is totally against this. The NAB is going to be fighting this tooth and nail, and it's very unlikely that this will see the light of day. It's also being held up because of the impeachment hearings right now and such. But there are two things that we need to make sure that everyone realizes here, and this is to and some confusion that we need to unconfuse. First of all, statutory maximum royalty of $500 annually for small commercial stations with less than 1 million revenue. So this is for the small mom and pop stations. For those who are not making a lot of money doing radio. And I guess you could extend that to even the clusters where they have non-profitable stations. If the station makes no more than $1 million in revenue per year, the royalty will be capped at $500 a year. For non-commercial educational stations, this includes full-service NCE and LPFM. The proposed statutory cap is $100 annually. Now, some are saying, oh, well, you know, they can raise this anytime. You know, the Copyright Royalty Board can come in and raise this, you know, kind of like what they do with ASCAP and BMI. No, it's not. In this case, they will be able to do that for full service with more than $1 million worth of revenue. But for non-common small commercial stations, these numbers are ingrained in the U.S. code. These numbers are in U.S. code. Only Congress can change U.S. code. So that means that, let's say somebody decides down the road, you know, we want to change the annual contribution by NCEs from $100 to $500. What they would have to do is they'd have to get a bill sponsored by someone in the House, companion legislation in the Senate, have it go through committees, have it go through the hearing process, or have it be a rider to something else, have that voted on by the House, by the Senate, and then sent to the President for signature. That's the only way that those two amounts are going to get changed, is by doing that. Also, too, just to clarify, this is the recording industry. This is the this is the performers. This is the musicians. This is not the composers and songwriters. This does not change ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, or GMR. Those will stay the way they are. Those will still be handled through regulation, through the Copyright Royalty Board, and those rates will go up year after year after year after year unless we can get some kind of legislation that would deal with that. And, you know, my discussions with the supporters of the bill, of the AMFM Act bill, are suggesting that we don't want to go that path right now. We really don't want to mix too much into this. So, yeah, you may have a $100 limit, and the question had come up about who would get the money. Again, like I said, it's going to be the musicians, it's going to be the performers, it's the performing rights, the performers and such. So my guess, and I think it's a good guess, is that money would go, that Sound Exchange would be the ones who would register that. Joy says, really, HD radio does have pay service? It has the capability to do subscription services. I guess there's, I've never seen it. I mean, I don't know if I've got a little one of those little cheap Best Buy HDFM receivers. I don't know if it has like some kind. I don't know if they've like have like serial numbers, like addressable serial numbers, kind of like cable boxes and XM radios do. But I don't know how they do that. I assume that they've got each one maybe has an electronic serial number that they can authorize. But yeah, I remember early on they were talking about doing subscription services on HD. There was a while there where even some public stations were talking about offering a subscription version of their station to donors that would not have all the pledge breaks in it. I remember that was talked about quite a few years ago. So there's that. At this time, there is some issues with the AMFM Act in regards to, and these are mostly engineering issues, in regards to how translators and boosters are handled. And right now, the law is written in a way that it expects that all retransmitting stations are going to receive the feed, the source broadcast over the air. And that is not the case with non-commercial FM stations that are part of a statewide network. It's not the case, I hate to say this, satellators. It's not the case with FM translators rebroadcasting AM stations. Technically, that is not the case with FM translators rebroadcasting HD subcarriers. They are allowed to do that directly because it's considered fill-in. It's a little known rule, but you still have to simulcast it on your HD too. It's kind of the sneaky way to originate programming on a translator. So you got those issues. You've also got with FM boosters, because really FM boosters are not fed over the air. Most of them are not. I had to get something changed in 19193 at the last minute because whoever wrote it had a misunderstanding of how boosters worked. That was coming from the Media Bureau. So there is that technical issue, and right now, REC is in this, has been on this booster blitz. We've got boosters authorized now on 4 Southern California LPFMs. One is already built. One is in the process of build. Actually, two of the stations are in the process of building their boosters. One is pretty far ahead right now, and we're just getting ready for them to get their final work done, and we should have our second booster on the air, and that should be the one over at KQLH out in Yucaipa. We also have KBUU, which is in the process right now of rebuilding everything, and they were involved in the fire, in the Woolsey fire, which destroyed quite a bit out there, and these 2 boosters are really going to help them out there. And then we've got Laguna Beach, which I haven't heard much from, whether they're going to be able to move forward with that or not. So that's where they're at on that. So let's see. We have the AMFM Act we just talked about. The RF exposure. The FCC just came down with this yesterday. I still have yet to completely read through it. It discusses. It basically states that the FCC is not going to be changing its guidelines for RF exposure for the various all the different radio services, including broadcast and amateur radio. So the guidelines that we have right now looks like they're going to pretty much stay in place. So for an LPFM, there is a worksheet. It's basically a flat rate, 6.1 meters or 20 feet or so from the radiating portion of the antenna to the nearest human head. So that's going to pretty much stay the way it is. There is some new rules it looks like they're trying to put in place or will be put in place regarding signage. But that should not affect a lot of you. For those of you who have LPFMs on shared towers, on leased towers, your tower owner is going to be is also going to bear some of that responsibility. But so really not much to report out of that. Now, just prior to going to broadcast here, we had a notice of apparent liability that was issued against, let me just find it here, Carolina Radio Group, licensee of W225 Delta Foxtrot in Raleigh, North Carolina. Looks like they've got a $2,000 notice of apparent liability. And in this case, this is a case where an LPFM down in North Carolina, Triangle Access Broadcasting, WRLYLP, has been fighting the translators down there. And in this one, they were able to, it was actually demonstrated that the translator switched their primary station to a different station and did not notify the FCC of that change in primary station. And that's what the $2,000 fine is for. The issue was in regards to duplication of service on a translator. On FM translators, you cannot have the same program, the same program service on two translators that cover primarily the same area. So basically the 60 dBs cannot have an overlap of 50% of population or more. And what happened in this case was that this was brought up on a previous argument that there was duplication of service. And the translator tried to make this technical reason as to why there needed to be overlap, because it does allow it if there is a showing of technical need for the duplication. And I'm not sure if that was for the same one or if that was for a different translator that Triangle's been fighting down in that area. LMS update grants are coming in very slowly. Yes, we still have quite a few that are still in the hopper. We're talking about modification and license to cover grants. Those are still in the hopper. There's still a lot in the hopper right now. The FCC's kind of handling them on a priority basis. Right now, they're giving priority to applications where there's interference, and applications that are riding up against 312G or the silent station 365-day limits. So we just recently got 2 grants for a couple stations just in the past couple days on that were in those situations. If you have a station, if your application is in that kind of a situation, if you're up against a 365-day clock, or if you're doing something to resolve interference, then please let me know. I'll look at the application and see if it's one that we can move forward to staff. I'm trying not to bother staff with a lot of stuff. They've got a lot on their plate right now. And this whole LMS problem is not helping issues. Ooh, discussion of HD, but I had missed it. My understanding is that HD radios can be set up for subscription service, but I've never heard of about that being done. No, as far as I've never seen it done either. And again, I mean, I'd have to really look at my radio and see how if there was a subscription service HD, is it only certain receivers that can do it? Is it maybe functionality that they put into older receivers that they don't put into new receivers? Kind of like, remember when CD players first came out? Remember the index function in a CD player? Remember the index? And then the later versions didn't have that. The idea was that you could use the index to get to like a certain piece of a classical work. We also, it was also used by some of the jingle companies to, when they wanted to put more than 99 tracks on a CD, that they use the index function to to denote which track is which. Yeah, I don't know. Does any I would assume some high-end CD players probably still come out with the index function. I don't know. I haven't seen that in many years. But my very first CD player back in the 80s did have the index function on it. All right, let's see what we've got here. We got a... Let's hope it comes up here. We got a new toy out there. It's now in the toy box. It is the renewal status tool. Apparently, the FCC is not sending any postal mail to applicants of renewals, and so most applicants have no way of knowing that their renewals have been granted. As a stopgap measure, about last week, I had installed a mode on FCC data where if a renewal was granted, you can go look up your station in FCC data and look on the right-hand side, look on in the application history, and if it was a renewal, if it was an LMS renewal and it was granted, the granted would be a hyperlink. You could click on that hyperlink and it would download your authorization from the FCC. That was a stopgap method. This is more the permanent solution for REC, and that is it's a renewal status tool. You go to the REC page. There's a link on there on the front of the page to go to this renewal status. You can also use the little drop down. What can we help you with? And then you put in your call letters, and if your renewal is already granted, it will give you all the information there, and it will give you a link to download your authorization, and so you can print that up and put that in with your station records. Don't throw away your old license. Keep that, and just use the this additional document kind of to show that it's been renewed. If the application has not been granted yet, it will tell you just that it's still pending. If there's any pleadings, like any petitions to deny or anything like that, it will give you a list. It will give you a link to all of the pleadings that were filed that are in LMS. So they'll all be there. And so far LPFM, with the exception of the 5 in Charlottesville, Virginia, we've been lucky. On renewals, there has not been any objections filed against LPFM renewals. Here's an interesting piece of trivia here. 106 to 108 on FM. When the FCC originally created the FM broadcast band, that was going to be used for what they called facsimile broadcasting. And just a quickie. Facsimile broadcasting was intended to be a device that would, it'd be kind of like a printer, basically kind of like a very archaic version of a modern fax machine, that it would receive the signal over the air, and then it would print on paper, on a roll of paper. It would basically print like the front page of the newspaper. That was the original thought of facsimile broadcasting, was to print news. In the 40s, there were stations that were experimenting with facsimile broadcasting during their experimental periods, like between midnight and 5 in the morning, and they were allowed to experiment with it on a non-commercial basis. This would have been a commercial form of facsimile broadcasting. Now, of course, that never went anywhere, and 106 to 108 was recovered and made with and was made part of the 100 channels that we have today. Yeah, newspapers. Yeah, remember when newspapers were dominant? Remember when everybody read the paper? And they would flip through, and somewhere in there they would see the public notices for broadcasters. Well, we've got 17264 that we just finished up comments on and reply comments on, that's going to do away with using newspapers for those public notices and instead moving it to online and over-the-air announcements. And so, we've been pretty busy on that. Common Frequency came in on the reply comments and made some pretty interesting observations. And so now it's up to the FCC. We're waiting on, I think, for a window for NCE. I think we're waiting on the, obviously we're waiting on 19.3 to be adopted and to be published as rules. But I also want to wait for 17.264 to come through for the public notices. So that way we're not having new entrants having to spend over $1,000 on advertising for their pending application that hasn't been granted yet. We need to get the newspapers out of this. The newspapers have gotten too big, too wide circulation. It's not like these days where a lot of folks have the pleasure of having a hometown paper. And so, legal ads are very expensive these days. And this is going to be a barrier for the small stations. This was never an issue. This was technically not an issue for LPFM in the previous two windows. Because even though there was a statutory requirement, somebody in the year 2000 totally overlooked the fact that that statutory requirement was there. And they said, we're not going to bog the LPFM stations down with all these reporting issues and stuff like that. So, they decided, okay, LPFM's not going to get public file. You don't have to do ownership reports. You don't have to have a chief operator designation or anything like that. We're not going to do those things. And the one thing, they also said that LPFM stations don't have to file for silent. There's nothing in 73.850 that requires that. And still that case, And the other one has to do with public notice. Public notice only came into play this year when somebody inquired to the FCC and said, do LPFM stations have to run the announcements? They were originally told no by staff. Staff even went so far as to update the website, the FCC website page on renewals. Then I got an email from Al Schuldner, who's the division chief of the audio division, and several other LPFM advocate stakeholders out there did too, saying, no, there's a statutory requirement. We may not have a rule for it, but we need LPFM stations to do public notice. Like, okay. So now we're going to be, this rulemaking that's going through right now is going to solidify that LPFM stations are required to do public notice. And what we're proposing is that public notice could be done through a third-party website that is set up just for public notices. The statute basically says, some have said, why can't the FCC do it? I think that was one of the arguments Common Frequency made. Why can't the FCC just post them? Because the way the statute reads, the way I read the statute, the way I interpret it, is that the applicant actually has to initiate it. And so we're looking at something like broadcastpublicnotice.com, and the idea is that public notices can be posted there. What the FCC wanted to do was they wanted stations, new entrants to use like Chamber of Commerce, city government, State Broadcasters Association, a quote community bulletin board website, which nearly 80% of our respondents to the constituent survey said does not exist. So they're not left with a lot of choices. So we're looking at a site that is, dedicated to just running public notices. To me, that would make perfect sense. Because, there's a few state broadcasters associations that don't want to have anything to do with LPFM stations. And, we have two right now in Delaware. Excuse me. Oh, hate that when it happens. See, this is the thing about radios. I can get away with that and nobody could see me. But in the state of Delaware right now, we have two city controversies going on right now in the city of Rehoboth Beach and in the city of Georgetown in regards to nativity scenes being posted and being put up in public places. Kind of similar thing could happen in the case of where the website for a city government is being used to give public notice of an application for a new faith-based owner in their local community. So I really don't think that we should be treading in that direction. I think we need to be looking at some other form of a public notice system, and I think it should be operated by the industry. And so that's what we're looking at there. Anyway, so getting a little off the topic there, that's what we've got. Also, the other issue that the FCC is just working on, this one just came out too. The FCC is going to be opening a comment period to renew the record on MB Docket 03-185, and this has to do with those little low-power TV stations on Channel 6 that run their audio carriers like radio stations so they can be heard on 87.7. We call them, well, the industry calls them Franken FM. I call them FM6s, just, you know, in the respectful way. But, you know, a lot of them, you know, talking about this, you know, talking about wanting to, the FCC is getting ready to phase out the last of the analog television, the low-power TV stations. There is a, the sunset date is going to be in July of 2021. And what the Franken FM industry is doing right now is to try to save their hide. Is they're trying to push this technology that would allow a digital television signal and an analog FM broadcast signal to coexist in the same 6 megahertz channel. This is kind of what it would look like. So you've got your digital television there that's going to take up about 5.5 megahertz. And then you've got an overlapping FM analog carrier there, that's the blue, that'll take the remainder of the bandwidth. And the Franken FM industry says that this will work, and that a digital television signal will still be able to you know, to decode. And I mean I believe the technology will work. The question is what do we do for the various operating rules? Because see, right now, because here's the situation, these stations, these low power TV stations, they're secondary stations. They have a 3 kilowatt limit, and this is regardless of height above average terrain. In a place like Mount Wilson in Southern California, that 3 kW would exceed a Class B. And basically what we're doing is we're giving them pre-1962 grandfathered superstation status. There's already an application pending, another one pending for Mount Wilson for 3 kW on Channel 6. Now, unlike the rules for, unlike the, not, and it's not necessarily the rules now, it's more of the, I guess it's good operating engineering practice for television stations. Normally, the audio carrier is normally at like, was it 20% or so, 10 to 20% of the video carrier, and that's an analog, because you know you got two separate carriers. You got an analog, you know, you got an oral carrier, and you got a visual carrier. And so if it's a 3 kW visual carrier, you know, your oral carrier is going to be somewhere around 300 to 500 watts or so. And you know, with that, I mean, that is still getting up there in towards the B1B area, but still, it's not a you know. But if under digital, and as you can and if you can see in the picture there, they are allowing the FM carrier. They are allowing that FM carrier to be able to take all the way up to 0 dB, all the way up to the top. So that means if they are a 3 kW digital television station, that means they're going to be able to run a 3 kilowatt FM broadcast station. And, you know, again, that is going to cause a lot of problems, because that is, in some cases, that is beyond a Class B, because there's no height above average terrain limitation. And, you know, and then there's questions whether LPFM stations, FM translators operating on 88.1, 88.3 must provide some kind of second adjacent, third adjacent channel protections to these Franken FMs. Like if the Franken FM is operating on 87.7, 2 channels off from 88.1. You know, there's going to be issues there. So you've got a service that has the potential of being in the Zone 1A area, Zone 1, Zone 1A areas, of being higher than a Class B. You've got a secondary service. You've got a commercial service. In some ways, this is like commercial LPFM. This is what Dave Solomon wanted! No. This is actually more of what Roger Skinner wanted, who wrote RM 9242, one of the two original one of the two rulemakings that created LPFM back in 2000. This is what he envisioned. He envisioned, you know, 1,000 or 3,000 watt FM stations operating and being able to run commercial under the similar structure to low power television. You know, these stations, I've got an issue with these, and you know, REC will definitely be involved in this proceeding, in this 03-185 proceeding. You know, I said on record in 19193 when this was brought up in regards to the elimination of Channel 6 protection requirements, that REC would support eliminating, just getting rid of Franken FMs altogether. We've got to get rid of them. They're not compatible with any current broadcast service that we currently have right now. And, you know, they're down below 92. So this also brings up the question, does that open up any issues in regards to reserve band? Technically, I don't think it would. But overall, is it fair that that we have a secondary station operating in that spectrum? And then also too, is there going to be any rights given to full service primary stations on 88.1 and 88.3 in respect to interference? The 88.1 in Long Beach, California has filed against the proposed Franken FM 3 kilowatt facility on Mount Wilson. So we'll see where that goes. But just wanted to let you know that that's opened up. It hasn't been published in the Federal Register yet, so we don't have deadline dates for that and such. So let's see what else is on the chat here. Yeah, WRGB has their 87.7 promoted for their local news and wanted to keep it. They actually ended up running, had it up running alongside their digital signal on Channel 6. Yeah. I remember, where was I? I think I was in Boise or some other city when I was working for Quest at the time. And the question, I remember watching on the news, and they had this big thing come up on the screen and said, you can listen to the morning news on your radio on 87.7. It's like, yep, and yeah, they were an analog channel 6 at the time. So let's see, when I was a kid in Montreal, Mom used to listen to the CBMT morning news on the FM radio downstairs by tuning to the end of the band. Didn't have to go all the way upstairs to watch the TV. Yeah. Here's another interesting little thing on that. And Joe says, hey! See, how do you like this? This is interactive. On that subject of audio carriers, this is a story I've told a few times probably over the years, is when I was growing up and in around 1980-81 time period, I was living in Scottsdale, Arizona. It was my first stint in Arizona. And at that time, Channel 3 was the ABC affiliate. Channel 12 was and still is the NBC affiliate. And Channel 10. Channel 10 was the CBS at that time. These days, it's Channel 3 is, I think, CW. I don't consider CW a network. Channel 12, NBC, stayed NBC the whole time. The CBS is now Channel 5. Channel 5 used to be an independent station, was the home of Wallace and Ladmo. And the ABC, the ABC moved to Channel 15, which at that time was a very small local, we're talking like Weird Al Yankovic U62 kind of TV station. And the interesting thing was that they were also the on-TV affiliate for the Phoenix area. So that means after 7 o'clock at night or whenever, they would go from the commercial mode to the scrambled mode. National subscription television programming will begin in just a moment. Oh, God, I remember that. From the days of Los Angeles and Channel 52, KBSC. Anyway, the way that subscription television worked, of course, they inverted the video carrier to make the scrambling. And they did some, they changed the sync and such to make the scrambling happen. But what they did with the audio, it was still an analog carrier. They just shifted it to a different frequency. They shifted the oral carrier outside of the normal, 25 kilohertz off the band edge, off the channel edge, for the sound. So, if you had like a scanner, like a Bearcat scanner or some kind of a radio receiver that could receive the UHF T-band between 470 and 512 megahertz, in the Phoenix area, you were able to hear on-TV audio through that on a frequency different than the oral carrier for the regular Channel 15. They kept that oral carrier on. It was unmodulated, and they kept it on. But an additional carrier came up on a different frequency, and that's where the soundtrack to the movie was played. So yeah, you could listen and hear all kinds of dirty words. All kinds of dirty words and such. And yeah, inverted horizontal sync, says George Bowen. Exactly. But yeah, that was my, that's probably one of my, I had a cousin that used to build the decoder boxes, the pirate boxes. You know, I admit it. Wasn't me. It was him. There's no familial interest here. You know, but yeah, that was you know, that was kind of neat in those days. Those days of on TV were kind of neat. I still have somewhere in here. I've still got an old Channel 52 on TV box. Not good for anything anymore, but still, it's an old Channel 52 on TV box from Los Angeles. Just for old time's sake. I'm trying to find a knob for it. I got to find a knob for it. If so, maybe one of these days, if we get a real house, maybe some real money started to come in, and you know, we get a real house and set up like an old TV, put the on TV box on top of it as a conversation piece. That'd be kind of funny. That'd be kind of cool. Anyway, any other questions or anything like that, feel free to post them in the chat right now. Also, just a reminder, if you are not subscribed to this YouTube channel, please subscribe. Let's get the number at least over 100, because I need to, you know, because once we get to 100 subscribers, then some new features kick in, and we can do a little bit more with the channel. If you need to contact me for anything, for any needs, low power FM, NCE, FM. I don't do TV or AM radio, but I pretty much am pretty full service around mostly everything FM, big or small. Give me a call, 1-844-REC-LP-FM, 1-844-REC-LP-FM, or 202-621-2355, 202-621-2355, lpfm@recnet.com. Of course, visit the website at recnet.com. There's plenty of links on there. Okay, Joe is asking, what is your opinion of my STA application for Channel 6? I saw it. And okay, if you want my frank opinion, first of all, what he's asking for is he's asking for an experimental authorization to operate on Channel 6 and to operate under, I believe if I read it correctly, to operate under this. To operate this kind of a system where, you know, 5.5 megahertz is going to TV, the remainder is going to that. The application package did not have any information in there about the nature of the overall experiment. Did not include any information on actual equipment that's being used, who else in the industry is overseeing this, who else in the industry is funding this. It's not there's no information in there like that at all. There's no information in there on what value this experiment will be, and there's no information in there on how any details or outcome from the experiment will go back to the FCC, and who in the FCC is going to be expecting this. There's no information about that at all. There's really no end date. What the FCC is going to see this is just an attempt to try to get a radio station. There's really not a lot of grounds on this one, unfortunately, and I think this one is going to be pushed to the side. I don't think this one... You know, we had a problem a while back in California, where we had somebody who filed... They actually filed for an experimental for the upper portion of Channel 6 to operate on 87.5, 87.7, 87.9, and then also on in-band on 104.7. And the idea was that they claimed it was for the testing of digital broadcasting. The OET, the Office of Engineering and Technology, they actually granted that experimental permit. And it turned out that the applicant was a pirate already in that area. And the 1047 is where their pirate operations were taking place. They were trying to use that to legitimize their pirate operation. The FCC field in Los Angeles caught wind, especially when there were complaints coming in that the station was running way over their authorized powers for the experimental. And they had done absolutely nothing below 88 like they had proposed. And they were operating analog on 1047 with no sign of any kind of digital. The FCC pulled the plug on that. So, again, like I said, you can't use an experimental permit to try to get a station. It's just, that's just not going to work. You've got to have a reason for filing it. Now, if this had come in from Venture Technologies, Signal Above, or one of the groups that's currently involved in MB Docket 03185 from the Franken FM industry, and they wanted to do an experimental authorization on an existing station, because they have quite a few of them already, then I could see the FCC granting this. But if it's just being done to just get a station, and especially given the track record of what's happened in the past, it's not going to happen. I'm sorry. I'm not going to file anything against this. And if the FCC does grant it, great. I'd like to see it happen. I'd like to see how it comes out. But if you want my honest opinion, I don't think it's going to get granted. I just don't feel that I don't feel that the experimental permit is the appropriate way to do this. Now, the FCC does grant short-term, very short-term, experimental licenses in the video service for low-power television. And these are mainly for stations. These are set up by commercial organizations that go out to mainly NASCAR events. And they set up a very low-power television station there for rebroadcasting of race information and such. And then what they do is they give fans these little radios and it's like a digital multiplex thing, and they can wear the radios, and the radios they can listen to the commentary. They can also listen to some of the scanner audio through it, and they charge for that. And that's how they do it. They do that on experiment. They do that on very short term, as in just for the weekend, just for the NASCAR events that are there at that location on the weekends. And we've also seen that happen before with low power, with these for football, NFL. I think NFL did have. I think some of the NFLs were a while back or something. I could have sworn there was some NFL games where this happened, and it was the same company that asked for it. It wasn't the league itself. And in the case of the NASCAR stuff, it's not NASCAR that's asking for it. It's some Sports Vision or something like that company that's doing this. So that's pretty much what we got there. AM radio is the best. It will always be. There will always be a place for AM radio in my heart. And we've talked on past weeks about digital AM MA3. Unfortunately, in this day and age, because the FCC is not doing squat where it comes to unintentional radiators, in equipment and such that comes on, that gets washed up on our shores, that's just basically destroying analog AM. FM, HD AM, at least gives the service a fighting chance to maintain some kind of sanity. But I do have issues about HD AM, mainly, especially where it comes to emergencies. And especially the fact that there's probably hundreds of thousands of people out there with older emergency preparedness kits with fresh batteries, but old AM radios. We also have the primary entry point, which a lot of these are big full Class A clear channel AM stations. How do we handle the primary entry point if one of those Class A's decides to go digital? So yeah, there are a lot of issues. The FCC will be bringing this up in comments. We'll have a comment period on this here pretty soon, and REC will definitely be participating. Anyway, we're coming up on the top of the hour. Coming up to 1 o'clock Eastern Time. It's getting windy out there. Windy Riverton. Or as like we used to say on the Wookiee Satellite Radio Network, from windy outer space. All right. Last call for alcohol. Anybody have any comments? Anything they would like to derail me on real quickly? Going once, going twice. Going 3 times. MA3 and MA3 is narrower than MA1 and about the same as straight analog. As for emergency stuff, LOL. Yeah, and that's the one thing is that that's the other misconception that we need to get through to folks, especially those in the hobbyist community, that they're thinking, oh, this is going to be IBOC, it bleeds on other channels and all that and such. And, you know, with the experiments with WWFD that's going on, the adjacent channel interference has been very minimal compared to a MA1 hybrid station. And the MA, but yeah, the MA3 is definitely a thinner bandwidth. It stays within the existing channel. What I am also concerned about is I'm concerned about output power, and especially the output power of the center carrier. What we're finding, what the WWFD testing is finding, is that the digital signal is reaching further than their analog counterpart contour, than their analog contours would be. So their equivalent of a 5 millivolt signal is actually going further. Their equivalent of a 2 millivolt, half millivolt signal is going further than it should be. At night, it does properly fill in the nighttime interference factor areas and such. So, and stereo, yeah, stereo, most definitely, yeah. I've heard HDA, I've heard hybrid HDAM, and I do like what I've heard. I've heard the recordings of WWFD, and I'm very impressed with the way that's going. I would like to see our country, I would like to see the industry step up and increase the number of increase the availability of HD receivers in this country, and make them more accessible and more affordable, and maybe get to the point of where some of these AM stations that are owned in clusters, they just move their AM station to a sub channel of their HD. They'll get much better performance than a translator, and maybe we can finally get rid of some of these translators, and also too, they can take down the AM station. These the HD needs to be more utilized. One of the other reasons that I believe that the industry is holding back is that there are some triggers that I'm aware of where if HD subcarrier if HD subcarrier stations are making like X% of revenue of all broadcasting, that's going to kick in some new copyright rules. So it's very possible that this is the reason why, like, for example, iHeart's doing their iHeart 80s and stuff like that down there where they're commercial free, where they can say, hey, we're not making any revenue off of this because we're not running any commercials. You know, maybe this is a collaborative effort on the part of broadcasters to keep the additional royalties from coming in. Chicken and the egg is right. '2020 is going to be a great year. Hopefully we can get a filing window in for NCE by the end of that year. Let's see what happens. 19.3 and 17.264 are the only two things holding it back. Then we have the analog sunset in 2021, July 2021. And then after that, and then after MB Docket 19193 is taken care of, I'm hoping that we'll have an LPFM window in the earliest early 2022, maybe even late 2021 after the sunset. So we'll see how that all goes. But for now, I think we're going to call it. We're way over time. Anyway, feel free to, if you need anything, let me know. We'll figure it out as we normally do. Thanks for watching. No live cast next week at this time. What we are going to have, do have the FCC meeting next week. So what I'm planning to do is next week, next Thursday, I will be in DC. I will be attending the meeting. I will also be meeting with staff. I've got 3 appointments with staff after the meeting to engage in some ex parte presentations, mainly in regards to MB Docket 19193 and specifically around the LP250 translator relief and LPFM short spacing. And that's it. And then what I'll do is after I get back to the room, after that, I will do a live feed. I don't actually stay at a hotel in Washington D.C. It's too damn expensive. Metro, this great thing called the Washington Area Metropolitan Transit Authority, WMATA. Great little thing. You can get on this little train, takes you clear out into halfway into Maryland. Get a hotel room out there for under $100 instead of paying like $400 a night at a boutique hotel in DC, and still have to either take Metro or something to get over to the FCC. It's very convenient. Oh, George, don't do this to me. Have you heard the guys doing high fidelity sideband on 6 to 8 kilohertz on HF bands? No. I think I've heard of this. Are we talking amateur or are we talking broadcast? I remember there was some kind of a high fidelity sideband thing in the amateur community a long time ago. I'd still like to see DRM happen more here on the shortwave bands. Not necessarily in the broadcast bands because we have a standard, but right now I don't think there's any DRM receiver that is being mass marketed right now. We've been waiting for the Titus 2 for quite a while. That one's never come around. Anyway, again, I'm running late. You know, the little clicker on the wall is saying overtime, 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 overtime. You know, so I'm going to have to go back to the union and demand some overtime pay here. Anyway, again, we'll see you we'll see you next week, but in the evening. And we'll be on Facebook Live next week. It'll be more like maybe like 6 o'clock or so in the evening Eastern time. After I get back to the room, after meeting with FCC staff, and then getting on the Orange Line, taking it all the way to New Carrollton, end of the line. It's about a 35-minute ride. And then from there, I've got a further drive to get to the hotel room. So that's how I save money for you all. And that's why when you donate money, we stretch it. We stretch that as much as we can. We stay in $99 hotel rooms instead of $400 hotel rooms where they'll bring you a goldfish in a bowl. When I used to work for Quest, I used to stay at the Hotel Monaco in downtown Denver, and they did that. And of course, the company paid for that, so I didn't mind. Anyway, take care from Riverton.